Hello, everyone, and welcome to Montclair News Lab. I'm Ryan Breda. Here's what's coming up on this week's episode.
First, recreational use of marijuana is now legal in New Jersey, but what about on the Montclair State campus? And later, back to the groovy days of vinyl. It's our latest music lab. All this and more on Montclair News Lab.
New Jersey laws changed last November allowing recreational marijuana. But what happens on college campuses, like Montclair State? News Lab reporter Louis Biondelillo tells us it's more complicated than you may think.
Marijuana users at Montclair State breathed a sigh of relief last fall. Students thought that this banner, Dream Big, Aim High, could finally become a reality on campus when it came to smoking marijuana.
Personally, I don't think the policy's fair for people who do smoke marijuana.
Over the past decade, many states have decriminalized and even legalized marijuana use. Now, it's New Jersey's turn.
I signed 3 bills that will fulfill the promise of the constitutional amendment the people of New Jersey overwhelmingly supported 3 months ago by legalizing adult use cannabis. As of this moment, New Jersey's broken and indefensible marijuana laws are no more.
Montclair State University has historically enforced drug laws on campus, arresting dozens of students in 2019 alone. But with the new law, will marijuana use be allowed on campus? Tara Meller, the Associate Director of Residence Life, says the policy still restricts marijuana.
The use or possession of recreational cannabis / marijuana or hashish is prohibited.
Many students are confused as to why they can use cannabis off campus, but it's still not permitted at the university.
Personally, for me, marijuana helps with a lot of mental issues. That's one of my main reasons for smoking it. I think if you look at it case by case, there's a lot of people using it to better themselves.
Last year, the university prohibited smoking and vaping on campus and removed all of the smoking areas. But that's not all. University Police Department Deputy Chief Kieran Barrett explained to me that there is a much bigger issue at hand. Marijuana is still illegal on a federal level, and if MSU were to allow it on campus, it could lose federal funding.
The university has to abide by certain things for financial aid, for certain regulatory purposes. So we have to make sure that we are having campus policy be enforced if that's the case.
The new laws forbid officers from intervening in many cases. So how will the university carry out its anti-cannabis policy on campus and in the dorms? The same way it regulates another already legal substance, alcohol.
If there's alcohol present, our staff would address it and work with the students to dispose of that item and eliminate it from the setting. And so in terms of cannabis, the way that will look is similar to alcohol in a lot of ways.
Many Montclair State students disagree with the ban on marijuana and say it will not deter users of the drug.
I feel like students have always found a way around the rules, whether, it's federal or conduct or anything like that.
Despite the change in law, marijuana is still outlawed on campus, but the penalties are much less severe. For Montclair News Lab, I'm Louis Biondelillo.
On last week's episode, News Lab reporter Carter Winter explored the challenges facing transgender people in the wake of a series of laws restricting their access to healthcare. In this week's special report, Carter takes us into the world of athletics and trans people.
There has been a major push for anti-trans legislation. This year, 31 states were looking at bills intended to keep transgender youth from playing on the sports team of their gender. NPR reports that supporters of these bills say they are meant to reduce what they call a competitive advantage that would make competition in some sports unsafe. The American Civil Liberties Union says that this reasoning is false and that these laws and arguments for them are discriminatory. Dr. Keith Strudler, director of the School of Communication and Media, has written extensively on issues of sports and society. Strudler says that this argument is very complex.
So there's really 2 sides of this argument. And on one side, there is, I think, the importance and need to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to participate in sport. And I think certainly those in the transgender community are ensuring and want to ensure that they have access to fair competition and the opportunity to participate and gain all the benefits that I think that all of us get from participating in sport. The other side, and I think the challenge, is that sport is built on this kind of foundation of this perception of fairness and equity. And I believe as we have this conversation about transgender athletes participating in traditional women's sports, people question or are unsure if that still maintains a level playing field.
Celeste Fiore, a civil rights lawyer in Montclair, points to a study done by the Rand Corporation for the U.S. military about the suspected impact of transgender soldiers on military preparedness.
And what they concluded was transgender people serving openly in the military did not make us any more exposed to attacks, and it did not impact our ability to defend ourselves. So if transgender people serving in the military didn't harm us, how could a little trans girl playing field hockey harm the country or harm the other girls around them? It's just ridiculous.
This legislation puts transgender athletes like Trevor Kenny at risk of not being able to play on the correct sports team.
It was definitely cool because I went from like in middle school not like being seen as a guy at all to hanging out with the most popular kids at my school and playing football with them.
Fiore says that anti-trans bills circulating around the country are coming from the Republican National Party.
There is a concerted, coordinated effort by conservatives and particular political action committees to put together packages of anti-trans legislation.
While these bills are mostly being pushed by southern states, they've made their way up the East Coast as well. They're even here in New Jersey.
I think that the more disturbing places are those states that have actually passed that legislation.
When you don't have that support, that is how we get these high statistics of trans youth killing themselves.
A need for community support led Celeste Fiore to start the Trans Affirming Alliance,
or TAA for short, really is what it says it is.
Just knowing that you're not sitting by yourself processing all of that could literally make or break it for someone and could literally save lives.
For transgender people, love is life-saving. Remember high school football player Trevor Kenny?
Nate is my boyfriend.
Trevor is my boyfriend. We live together. He's somewhere out there doing a puzzle or something. I don't know.
It's great to have someone who understands the process in some way.
I think having a partner who is also trans and identifies the way that you do is extremely helpful.
Unfortunately, many transgender people don't have this kind of support in their lives.
Sometimes in queer communities, we accept something less than what we deserve because of this, like, nobody will ever love me because I am this. I think that queerness is really more about all different types of love.
You know, I do everything I can for him and he does everything he can for me. And that means everything for both of us.
A loving couple, a passionate lawyer, and a resilient community speaking out for justice. For Montclair News Lab, I'm Carter Winter.
All semester, the School of Communication and Media at Montclair State has been exploring key issues as a part of our focus, racial justice. Recently, Dr. Tara Conley spoke to Dr. Eddie Glaude of MSNBC, news executive Vicki Burns, and the senior producer at NFL Media, Anthony Smith, as she led a lively discussion among top thinkers in the field.
What should be the role of media professionals? This includes news media, entertainment and sports media, and across social media.
We live in a society, as you say, as I write, where white people are valued more than others, and that valuation evidences itself in our social, political, and economic arrangements. And we tell ourselves a host of stories. We justify those sets of arrangements. So it seems to me that we have to figure out how to shift the center of gravity of our stories. What can we bring into view that might disrupt a set of assumptions?
And each generation gets to define their message and their movement. What was so impressive about last summer after George Floyd was the multicultural nature of the people, the young adults who came out into the street. And I was impressed by how informed they were. And it sort of inspired me to challenge my team to do a different kind of stories about these issues. And we created a franchise that we called Created Equal. There was a lot of conversation last year about a reckoning on race. And I thought a lot of that language was accurate, but I thought it might be off-putting. And so we decided to go with Created Equal because that was positive and was aspirational. At the same time, it acknowledged that this is something foundational in America that we haven't quite achieved.
In regards to sports media, I think that in many ways, we look at the history of progress and movements throughout the course of this particular country, and we know that in many ways, sports has led the way. Whether it was Jackie Robinson 8 years before the Montgomery bus boycott, Joe Louis defeating, Nazism and Max Schmeling, Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali, those that we watch play on the fields and the gridirons and the basketball courts have led the way.
To catch the whole symposium, search the School of Communication and Media at Montclair on YouTube.
In this week's POV, Point of View, we don't go very far. My co-anchor, Bernice Stegwa, takes us into the home of Montclair News Lab, in the News Lab.
Hi, my name is Bernice Stegwa, and this is my campus POV. Now, believe it or not, I wanted to be a doctor 2 years ago until I took a journalism class my senior year of high school that changed everything. Now, when it came to Montclair, I came undecided because I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. I knew for a fact that if I walked into this building, it would finally hit that I wanted to be a journalism major and that being a White House correspondent was my dream. So one fateful day, I finally got the courage to step into these halls and I sobbed. The second I saw this room, I couldn't contain all the emotion that I had finally reached my aha moment. And since then, I have been pursuing my dream. That's all for this week. Thank you so much for letting me share my favorite spot on campus.
Some up-and-coming entrepreneurs are finding new ways to turn their art into money. News Lab reporter Alana Conti has one student's story.
Vanessa Casella is a senior film student at Montclair State who considers herself to be creative. 2 years ago, she says she got hooked on string art. This is a type of craft that uses string as the primary material to create all sorts of art.
I started an Etsy for it after a lot of family and friends were purchasing from me.
This would inspire Vanessa to share her work, but it wasn't until she started posting videos on TikTok that things took a turn for the better. David Axelrod, an economics professor at Montclair State University, says,
promotion, even if it's just as simple as saying, hey, I have this business, this is what I sell, maybe some quotes from people that like what you do, that is already a big step forward.
TikTok was becoming a really popular app, especially during quarantine. I decided to make a few videos that showed the process of how I embroider my canvases. After a few videos that I posted, one of them kind of went viral overnight. It's now up to 2.1 million views.
Since starting her business, Vanessa has sold 15 string art pieces, making $375 last summer. She sold about 10 custom pieces and plans to grow that number this summer.
I do keep my academics first and foremost because that's most important to me, but this is something that I'll open up when I have more free time.
After graduating, Vanessa plans to continue growing her business.
Crafting has just become something for me that I can kind of take a break from my schoolwork and, regular life and escape a little bit.
A student making art and making money. For Montclair News Lab, I'm Alana Conti.
Finally today, a blast from the past. Vinyl records were declared dead, but now they're coming back. News Lab reporters Olivia Lacini and Emma Coughlin share their personal stories on how they went from digital media back to round records.
Hi, I'm Emma. And I'm Olivia. And this is our vinyl collection. My dad is a bit of an audiophiliac, and he bought a record player a few years ago, which really helped me find my love for vinyl. My dad also influenced a lot of my music taste. My mom also influenced my music taste as well as getting me into vinyl. She threw a vinyl party a couple years back, and ever since then I've had another reason to spend money on albums like Abbey Road. Classic rock is also a big one for me. I also really like classic country and folk, which is something that I got from my dad. So James Taylor, Simon & Garfunkel, and Phoebe Bridgers. I just really love building up my own collection with music like Nirvana and MTV Unplugged.
Died alone a long time ago.
And I just think that listening to vinyl is the right way to listen to music. Wouldn't you agree, Emma? I completely agree. Recording vinyl really picks up all of the sounds in any recording, so you really get everything you want out of your music. Well, let's get back to listening to music the right way, the groovy way, vinyl.
Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Montclair News Lab, on Twitter at MSU News Lab, and check out our website, montclairnewslab.tv, for more. That's it for this week's episode of Montclair News Lab and this season. It was an honor to be your anchor this year, and I'm looking forward to what's to come. Until then, I'm Ryan Breda. Stay safe, everyone.